നമസ്കാരം. മെട്രോ മലയാളവും വേൾഡ് മലയാളി കൗൺസിലും ചേർന്ന് നടത്തുന്ന ഫയർസൈഡ് ചാറ്റിലേക്ക് ഏവർക്കും സ്വാഗതം. ഇന്ന് നമ്മൾ കൈകാര്യം ചെയ്യുന്ന വിഷയം ഓസ്ട്രേലിയ ഇന്ത്യ സ്ട്രാറ്റജിക് പാർട്ണർഷിപ്പ് ആൻഡ് ഗ്രോയിങ് ബൈലാറ്ററൽ ബിസിനസ് ഓപ്പർച്യൂണിറ്റീസ്. ഈ വിഷയത്തെക്കുറിച്ച് ആധികാരികമായിട്ട് നമ്മളോട് സംസാരിക്കാൻ അറിവുള്ള രണ്ട് വ്യക്തിത്വങ്ങളാണ് ഇന്ന് നമ്മളുടെ അതിഥികളായിട്ടുള്ളത്. ഓസ്ട്രേലിയ ഇന്ത്യ ബിസിനസ് കൗൺസിൽ നാഷണൽ ചെയർ ശ്രീ ജിം വർഗീസ്, കൂടാതെ AIBC New South Wales State President Sri Irfan Malik.
Thank you. വളരെ നന്ദി. Namaskaram to all of you who are listening here in Australia as well as globally, the global Malayalis as well as in Kerala as well. Welcome again. Pleased to be here, part of this initiative, and I thank Kiran and Vijay Chandraji for facilitating this session, which is an informal chat. And very timely as well, as we have growing relationship between Australia and India, and you are all hearing throughout the news, even both the prime ministers calling out our closest friend and ally between Australia and India. So it's a very timely conversation to reflect more on a migrant journey of a Malayali as well, who are part of the Australia-India Business Council, but also helping to drive and facilitate Australia-India business relationship, and also reflect on some of the opportunities for Kerala as well. So on that note, again, I welcome Jim. Namaskaram. Welcome again. And yeah, thank you for coming on board, Jim. I'm always inspired by your journey, your whole family's journey as well, coming to Australia very early, in the 60s, I understand. And then you establish as a whole family through. Would love to hear from you about your own personal journey as a migrant and how you've established yourself through the years as well.
Yes, well, it's quite a long journey. So my parents were both teachers. So my mother was from Anaklam, and my father was from up in near Pascotem, near the Manamila River, further up there at Karnikar. So we used to say mum was from the coast and dad was from the hills. So we went to British Tanzania first in the early 1940s. And then both my parents went to Kenya, where my mum was a primary school principal and my dad was a secondary school principal. And then my father, in the early 50s, decided to do a Master's of Comparative Education at the University of Birmingham. And so while he was doing that, he was writing his thesis there. Mum and my brothers and one sister went to Kerala. And that's, of course, where I was born. I was born in my grandfather's house in Kurikad, which is not far from Tripunithra. And my father wrote his thesis predicting the independence of the African states and Kenya in particular. And his thesis was banned by the British government as being treasonous and could only be read at the University of Birmingham in UK. So my father decided there was no future for the Indians in Kenya. So he applied for the family to go to UK, which is readily available for us, Canada, New Zealand, and Australia. Now, my mum, by that stage, we're talking about 1963, 64, we were a family of, I had 8 siblings, 1 girl, eight boys, very Syrio-Malabar Raj. So we were converted by the Apostle St. Thomas in the 1st century AD. And pretty much an unbroken line right until we changed direction here in Australia. My father came here in a teacher's college at New South Wales to teach. He had a 5-year permit, but when he came here, the Australian government advised him that his permit was only for 3 years. In his final 2 years of that visa, we went to the University of Queensland, where he was appointed as a lecturer in comparative education, because he's one of 3 world experts. And in his final time of that visa, close to expiry, there was the Minister for Immigration, Sir Hubert Opperman, and Dad gave a very critical speech about the White Australia policy, which is a pretty radical thing to do in those days, which is 64. And well, my mother was pretty relaxed about it because she had always wanted to go back to Kerala where we had land and property, and we just, resume a Kerala lifestyle. And we were all a very close-knit family. We probably would have all had arranged marriages and done careers in Kerala and India. But instead, what happened was 2 weeks later, the Minister for Immigration rang Dad personally and offered him permanent residency, which was a bit of a shock. So Dad then decided we'd take permanent residency, and the rest is history. Right? So we all ended up going to the University of Queensland, one to QUT as it's known today. Dad pushed us to either law or medicine. That's what you had to do. So most of us went and did medicine. Peter and myself managed to escape medicine. I did first law, and then I did arts, history, and other university degrees, including MBA, and I did PED. And Peter continued to go to first class honors in history and went on to join the Foreign Service. So we were kind of the non-medicos, and my eldest brother was studying to be a priest. He, as is the Karawar tradition with the elders, and he left the priesthood 2 years before ordination as a Jesuit. So we all went into careers, and being a close-knit family, we used to get lots of arranged marriage proposals from Kerala, but we never really acted on it because we never even thought about it until my second eldest brother decided that he fell in love with an Australian woman and wanted to marry. And I think there was more opposition from our end than from the Australian end, because I think my parents' concern about the cultural difference between being a Malayali and marrying Australians. My mother took the view that as long as they shared the same values, she was quite comfortable who you married. In the end, none of us actually married, would you believe, Malayalis at all. We all married Anglo-Celtic, Lebanese, and Eastern European. So, and that's because there weren't really many Malayalis. You could count them on your fingers. And my mother was the first president of the Malayali Association in Queensland. And we held the meetings in our house. There were about 4 Malayali families. And then eventually we created a much bigger association. I corporatized it and was the first president of the Malayali Association in Queensland. And I designed it, the constitution, on the basis that with 3 or more Malayalis are together, you'll get 2 associations. And that's turned out to be true. So the constitution allowed for other bodies to be developed, but there was a coordinating body where you could celebrate Onam or Christmas, or Diwali as one, despite your differences in, being Muslim Malayalis, Hindu Malayalis, Christian Malayalis. We've all got together and get on pretty well, really, at the end of the day. I think there's more tensions between Syria Malabar and the non-Syria Malabar Christians than between Hindus and Muslims. But it's all good. So our journey to Australia, therefore, my father was absolutely believed that you had to make a contribution to the wider society. He forbade us from speaking Malayalam. Now, this may sound very interesting because he was an educator, and he believed that if English was your primary language, you would have a global advantage in life, and that you could easily learn Malayalam as a second language. That really did upset my mother, who was a Malayali scholar, and try to teach us as much Malayalam as we can, but it's very difficult to do that. So net result is that we're not very fluent in Malayalam, although I find when I go to Kerala, I'm able to pick it up fairly quickly. It wouldn't take me long to really get back into it. So we all did various degrees in medicine, history, and we all went into the professions. And personally, I joined the Victorian Public Service first as a graduate recruit and worked my way up to a deputy secretary in Victoria, and then to a director general here in Queensland for over 12 years. And then I joined the private sector with Maha Senathambi, who owns, he's a multi-billionaire who owns 75% of Springfield. He's a Tamil origin. And so I was chief executive of that for 5-6 years, and I still chair the board and work there part-time. And have a number of other board positions, including a startup company called MindHive. I'm also the national chair of the AIBC, as Irfan knows, and also for 20 years I've done voluntary work with the Indigenous community of Lockhart River in North Queensland, and I'm the deputy chair of the Puya Foundation, and also I do other work on that philanthropic side with the Order of Malta for Coats for the Homeless and all that sort of work, and that's in Asia Pacific as well with Malteser International. And basically, an extremely busy life, as well as being a board member of Trade Investment Queensland and a director of the Victoria Institute of Technology. It's a number of hats. I work 24/7, but I don't regard it as work. To be honest, I don't have to work. I could live a reasonably comfortable life, but I enjoy what I'm doing. Yeah. And when I see dementia and all of that happening around me, I think it is very important, as I hit my 70th year, to continue to be really intellectually alert, making a difference, and contributing to the wider society. So that's my story. My siblings are quite well known, as you know. Yeah. While Peter is a former High Commissioner to India. And my father had a fantastic belief in the ability of his children, because he told the Malayali community here in the 60s that he thought one of his children would become the High Commissioner to India. And they thought he was one of the most egotistical parents you could possibly have. And they all thought it would be laughable for a Malayali, having migrated to Australia, to think one of their children would be the High Commissioner to India. But unfortunately, he did not live to see Peter take that position up. Peter, of course, went on to be Secretary of DFAT, the head of the Chancellor of University of Queensland now. And my other siblings are all very successful psychiatrists in particular, one physician. One's been a very famous scientist having helped got the Australia Prize for the discovery for flu vaccine with a team there, delivered a number of scientific papers with CSIRO. And my sister, of course, did her doctorate on Indians overseas and worked at the Australian National University. And the other two brothers, one is done a lot of work with the underprivileged, and that's our eldest brother. And then there's Peter and myself that are really outside of that. So that's the family. We used to go to Kerala on average, at least every 2 years. So I have memories of that going back to early childhood and then seeing the changes in Kerala. But we haven't, because of COVID-19, I didn't get a chance to go to Kerala. I was hoping to go to Kerala last year, actually, but I haven't had the chance. But we do get visits from our cousins here. And they are one's in Delhi, one's in the United States. Others are in Kerala. In fact, one of my cousins is the chief operating officer for Kochi Airport. And one time, my wife and I went to Kerala, and I thought, look, it'd be too difficult seeing the relatives. It takes too much time. So I just spent 48 hours and did a few things. And I got a phone call from my cousin saying, "Why didn't you come to see us?" And I said, "How did you know we were here?" And he said, "Well, I looked at the manifest and noted you were there." So the moral of that story is you can't slip into Kerala without somebody knowing that you're there.
True. Small world. Thank you, Jim. It was phenomenal. Great inspirational story there. The journey through your father, his vision, and also what your family, the versatile, diverse nature that you've all been successful and what you've achieved and contributed to the community as well. And definitely been a model to Malayalis globally as well. So definitely recognize that. Again, recognize and quite pleased to have known you, and also pleased to be interacting with your family as well. So phenomenal, and hats off to your dad and your whole family as well. So thank you for sharing your story. As you've obviously emerged through your various business, community leadership, and strong trade and investment background, and over the years, nearly last 4 years at the helm at Australia Business Council as the national chair, it's a phenomenal time for Australia-India business, trade, and investment. Now, Australia-India Business Council is, one of the most recognized industry body in Australia, but the most prominent in the Australia-India bilateral trade and investment, which is again over the last 35 years seen its evolution. So if you can share some of your thoughts of what was it then and now in terms of Australia-India bilateral opportunities, and maybe also reflect on the role of your brother, Dr. Peter Varghese's India Economic Strategy 2035 as well, what it's really paved a pathway of greater collaboration between Australia and India as well.
Well, I think if you took a very honest assessment of the Australia-India trade relationship, it hasn't really achieved the potential that it has been able and promised when you look back at the last 50 years, for example. Now, part of that reason is that in some ways, having such a close connection with the Commonwealth Curry and cricket has kind of distracted serious trade and investment with India across the range of areas from health, education, manufacturing, resources, infrastructure. All of those areas have got enormous potential. And so China ended up taking more prominence than India. And that was also characterized by a perception that it was very difficult to do business in India, that corruption was rife and was very hard to get things done. I heard this hard luck story from the chief executive of the ANZ Bank on how they had to get out, and Barclays and all took over and so on. There are many stories like that. But looked at in context, the Indian diaspora has got a very, very important role to play here. And since the numbers are getting over 700,000, we're very well placed to actually accelerate the trade and investment between Australia and India, particularly in the geopolitical changes now taking place with the dominance of China in Australian trade, which is becoming a significant security concern in terms of risk management for our trade and investment as a nation here in Australia. So we're in a new era of Australia-India relationships. India is going to be the third largest economy in the world in a relatively short time of 2030. It has enormous potential, and particularly COVID-19 has highlighted this, in the supply chains, from everything from health to education to resources, rare minerals, for example, to infrastructure, to information technology, defense, and the list goes on. And that was really part of Prime Minister Modi and Prime Minister Morrison's virtual summit when they had their 9-point agreement. So I think we're in a very promising state now. We've just had visits to India from Peter Dutton, our Defence Minister, and Marissa Payne, our Foreign Affairs Minister, and our Minister for Trade, Simon Birmingham, will be there in a couple of weeks as well. And Prime Minister Modi also met with our Prime Minister with the Quad. And the Quad is a very important relationship. It's not just a defence relationship. It is also a social, economic, and political relationship that I think shows a lot of promise. So when you then look at a particular country like Kerala, you'd notice that Kerala has 8% agriculture, about 28% in industry, and 63% in services, broadly. So when you look at that, there is enormous potential in Kerala to actually do business in terms of trade and investment, because it is the 9th largest economy in India and has an annual gross GSP of $138.88 billion. Now, when you look at that in context, and that's for 2020-21, when you look at that in context, that is a pretty important trade for Australia. And there are many areas in the Kerala side that we haven't actually explored. It's largely in agriculture. For example, our best fruit in Kerala is jackfruit. Now, jackfruit grows in abundance in North Queensland. And I reckon just, the capacity to just export that is fantastic, as well as other lot of our Kerala food, is to me, lots of opportunities. So I've tried to give a bit of a Kerala flavor here as well, not just a Australia-India flavor. And I think we're in an exciting time in the Australia-India relationship. We, as the Australia-India Business Council, are extremely well placed to assist this, because we have undertaken a very radical reform of AIBC by actually introducing the notion of industry chapter chairs. These are individuals that are very motivated, high profile, but they're not interested in getting involved with state chapters or presidencies and all that. And they're willing to put a big effort into it. And that's really paying off as we look at our Make in India, our agriculture, agribusiness, our health chairs, our resources in renewable energy, education, and the list goes on with infrastructure. It's a very exciting time, information technology. So when you look at all of that, I think it's a very, very exciting time for us. And in terms of Kerala, I think we, in addition to our roles, we can do a lot to actually promote the Kerala-India trade. And our Tanya Uni, who's our health chair, is of course a very high-profile Malayali here in Queensland and Australia. And if I'm not mistaken, I think she's in the Lok Sabha as well. So I would say that things look pretty good, and let's open the doors to look in the supply chain and do something serious.
Yeah. Thank you, Jim, for kind of weaving that story around the opportunities between broadly Australia and India, and the journey now that we have embarked on with AIBC, with a focus on various key industry sectors and collaboration, but also broadly opportunities with Kerala as well. So just to add on to that, entrepreneurship is something which we have supported quite actively between Australia and India. In fact, at AIBC, we had facilitated Australia-India Innovation Bridge programs to connect both the ecosystems and some of the sectors for really key for Kerala entrepreneurs, which we are actively working with Kerala Startup Mission and the Kerala Tech Parks, include healthcare tech, med tech, agri-tech, education tech, defense space tech being one huge with success stories from Kerala, which we can leverage. And there's a growing demand for Australia to really excel in the space tech and defense space. Advanced manufacturing, whilst Australia wanted to shift a lot of manufacturing out of Australia into China, but the new landscape has made Australia realize that they need to build resilience and build on that advanced manufacturing capability. Cybersecurity and emerging tech as well is a huge sector where Kerala has got a strong capability which we can leverage. And then I definitely don't want to miss out on art and culture. This is something which Kerala has got it's a cultural melting pot and strong, and even we have indigenous connections between, well-documented indigenous connection between Australia and India as well. So definitely art and culture would also be a strong force to reckon for Australia and India and Kerala to collaborate. And the new Colombo plan, which is again Australian government supported program, which fosters Australians to kind of come to India and the Indian subcontinent to really know the culture and really learn the culture of business as well by engaging Indians in India. So huge opportunities, and Kerala can be a perfect bet to really foster and even have a soft landing program for businesses looking at launching into India with the amazing stats that Jim mentioned, including one of the best OECD rated state in India with top education and literacy. Of course, from a scaling perspective across India or servicing other markets, you would look at then also expanding into other states. But Kerala is a very good pilot soft landing state for businesses to look at as well. And I feel, and also one of the points that Jim touched on, which resonates, and it's something which the president of India also had called out when he was here, the diaspora plays a major role as a living bridge. So Malayali diaspora as well, such as us, we have a strong role to play, and all of us have a role to play as ambassadors, individual ambassadors, to facilitate not only people-to-people ties, but also business, trade, investment pathways as well. But as the prime ministers have said, both Australia and India are closest friends, and this is one of the best faces as we look ahead next 2 years. And with the Australia-India Business Council taking the lead, and with World Malayali Councils and all our partners, we would love to foster further success stories. And we are about business-to-business transaction as well. So that's something which at AIBC, and we will be focusing on enabling and facilitating business-to-business trade connects and transactions. We also will be, facilitating virtual trade missions and CEO leadership connects as well, with a view that we want to create impact. Now, no more just the policy framework discussion and conversation. We want to make business transaction happen between Australia, and we believe the time's right, and definitely keen to work closely with AIBC and leverage where World Malayali Council can support as well. Jim, on a final note, as for a budding entrepreneur or a migrant looking to migrate from Kerala, with a buzzing diaspora community here in Australia, what will be a quick piece of advice or key 3 words that you would want to share with them, which would inspire them?
I think the key 3 words would be vision in Australia, vision to make a difference. The second is adaptability. And the third is persistence for success.
I think very valuable, and in fact, this is something that is required for any migrant who's got the vision.
Yeah, because the other thing that I would add that we could do in Australia to promote the Malayali culture is to have a Malayali festival, a cultural and cuisine festival, right? Where we bring in a boat race, for example. We bring in Kathakali, right? We bring in even martial arts.
Yeah.
And we also have a specialized cuisine where we can enjoy appam with stew, curry mean, polichu, Malabar parota, pumpkin, palada payasam, Kerala prawn curry, Talasheri biryani, and fish mole. Now,
love that. Already mouth-watering.
So when you look at that and you bring that to an Australian audience, New South Wales, Queensland, whatever, we could create a very exciting festival in the future and tie that in with trade and investment between Kerala and Australia and whichever states that we want to do it with.
Yeah, excellent stuff. Thank you again for sharing those delightful words. And I also resonate, and I want to take the words of someone who has inspired me, Indra Nui, that we all come with a migrant, mentality where we want to give a bit more to our community and the land that has embraced us and adopted us. And still we have a link back to the land where we all come from. So definitely, those values keep us all strong. And as I say, in our hearts, always both the land we belong to now as well as where we come from is all strong, and we back ourselves whenever there is an opportunity. So on that note, again, thank you, Jim, for taking your valuable time and sharing your inspiring thoughts, all those insights that you've shared about your family and your own story. Thank you for taking time, and we look forward to working closely with you and also bringing you to the World Malayali Council.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Globally, and I look forward to curating certain business global forums as well, where we'll look forward to having you on board as well. Thank you, Jim.
സജീവമായ ചർച്ചയിൽ പങ്കെടുക്കാൻ പറ്റിയത് സന്തോഷമുണ്ട്. കാരണം നമ്മൾ ഓസ്ട്രേലിയ, ഇന്ത്യ എന്ന 2 രാഷ്ട്രങ്ങളെ പറ്റി പറയുമ്പോൾ പലതും നമുക്ക് അന്യമായ ഒരു തലത്തിലാണ് കാണാൻ പറ്റിയത്. പക്ഷേ ഇപ്പോ 2 പ്രധാനപ്പെട്ട മലയാളികളായ നമുക്ക് അഭിമാനിക്കാവുന്ന 2 മലയാളികൾ ഓസ്ട്രേലിയ ഇന്ത്യ ബിസിനസ് കൗൺസിലിലെ ചെയർമാനും പ്രസിഡന്റായി വന്നു എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് തന്നെ നമ്മളെ സംബന്ധിച്ച് മലയാളികൾ, പ്രത്യേകിച്ച് മലയാളികളെ സംബന്ധിച്ച് വളരെ അഭിമാനകരമായ കാര്യമാണ്. പ്രത്യേകിച്ച് നമുക്ക് ഫ്യൂച്ചർ ജനറേഷൻ, പുതിയ തലമുറയെ നമുക്ക് എങ്ങനെ ഈ ഒരു അവസരം, വിശാലമായ ലോകം തുറക്കുകയാണ്. ഈ 2 രാഷ്ട്രങ്ങളുടെ സംയുക്തമായ നീക്കം, സൗഹൃദ നീക്കം, പുതിയ കരാറുകൾ എല്ലാം തന്നെ 2 സംസ്കാരങ്ങളുടെ കൂടിച്ചേരലാണ്. അതിന് നമ്മുടെ പുതിയ തലമുറയെ പാകപ്പെടുത്തുന്നതിന് ഉള്ള വെളിച്ചം ഉന്നയിക്കുന്ന ചർച്ചയായിരുന്നു ഇത്. പ്രത്യേകിച്ച് നമുക്ക് അഭിമാനമായ ജിം വർഗീസ് എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞ ആ മഹത് വ്യക്തിയുടെ സാന്നിധ്യം, അതുപോലെ തന്നെ കൗൺസിലിൽ പ്രസിഡന്റ് ആയിരിക്കുന്ന നമുക്ക് പ്രിയപ്പെട്ട ശ്രീ ഇർഫാൻ മാലിക്, പ്രത്യേകിച്ച് മലയാളി കൗൺസിലിന് അഭിമാനിക്കാവുന്ന, മലയാളിക്ക് മുഴുവൻ അഭിമാനിക്കാവുന്ന, ഇന്ത്യക്കാർക്ക് തന്നെ അഭിമാനിക്കാവുന്ന രീതിയിലുള്ള 2 വ്യക്തിത്വങ്ങൾ ചേർന്ന് നടത്തിയ ഈ സംഭാഷണം തീർച്ചയായിട്ടും നമുക്ക് വരും കാലങ്ങളിൽ നമ്മുടെ ഭാവി പ്രവർത്തനങ്ങൾ, ഭാവി ഈ ബിസിനസ് സംരംഭമാണെങ്കിൽ ശരി, 2 രാഷ്ട്രങ്ങൾ തമ്മിലുള്ള പല കരാറുകളിൽ നമ്മുടെ ജനതയെ ഉപയോഗിക്കുന്ന രീതിയിലുള്ള എന്തൊക്കെ ചെയ്യണം എന്ന് അറിയാൻ കഴിഞ്ഞ സന്തോഷമുണ്ട്. തീർച്ചയായിട്ടും ഇതൊരു പുതിയ തുടക്കം, വെളിച്ചമുള്ള തുടക്കം എന്ന് ഞാൻ വിശ്വസിക്കുന്നു.